Let's bring in Martha MacCallum, anchor and executive editor of the story, and Marc Thiessen, Fox News contributor and former speechwriter to George W. Bush. Martha, let's start with you. You got to be on the air with your own program in about 28 minutes. What are your top line thoughts about what we've heard over the past hour and 25 minutes?
Well, it's extraordinary. And, you know, the first incredible part was to look back at this mission, as you and Sandra were just discussing. And, you know, the words of John Radcliffe, he said, "Now all can believe we will not leave any man behind." And he said the president had been extraordinary in his leadership in all of this. He said, you know, he has political courage, which a lot of people don't have. This was an incredibly dangerous mission. The president also sort of detailed something that had been out there a little bit, John and Sandra and Mark, with regard to what happened. He said, you know, they took it down with a shoulder-fired missile, and it went right at the engine. It was a heat-seeking missile that went right at the engine. So every once in a while, you know, they're going to get something, they're going to be able to make a hit, even though they've been so decimated. So I think the overall theme about what happened over the weekend was extraordinary and summed up, and I'll finish here, by Pete Hegseth, who said that this pilot was shot down on Good Friday. He was then the next day in a cave, and he was reborn on Easter as the sun rose. I mean, I thought that was an incredibly moving moment. I think all Americans are just so proud to hear about the incredible courage of those who were involved in this mission. It's just absolutely extraordinary. I think it's worth taking a moment to really think about it, to be proud of them, to pray for them, and to be so grateful for the end of this story.
Yeah, Martha, and just the detail that we were learning about the airman treating his own wounds as he lay there, but knowing, as General Kane said, they know we are coming for you. Yeah. But he also detailed, and it really struck me, General Kane, how important it was for that particular pilot, when he was describing the details, to have the will to survive for them to get him out of there. Listen here.
The single most important contributor to a successful rescue operation is the spirit of attack inside the heart of that downed aviator. Their will to survive, their will to evade, their will to recover is everything. In this case, the backseater's absolute commitment to surviving made much of our efforts possible.
What a moment that was, Martha, when he ended his remarks with Dude 44, welcome home, job well done.
Yeah, I mean, it's an absolutely incredible story. And when he talks about, at one point, the president talked about how they were all nervous, as you would expect in that room, because the first mission failed. They got stuck in the sand. So they're watching all of this in real time, knowing that they have a lighter force that is now on the way in to try to land in the same place to get this guy out. And it succeeds, but the heart-stopping moments in between, I think, you know, obviously were so well described there today. But they talked about 40 miles away, the president said, that they thought they saw movement on the mountain. And 40 miles away, they're looking, we think we see movement on this mountain. I mean, it's an absolutely incredible story. And then he said that, you know, this airman started to move around a bit more, and they positively identified that he was alive and he was there. And the other thing I'll end with is that, you know, General Kane said, they know, these two downed airmen, that we are going to come get them and that we are on the way.
Incredible.
Yeah, you had to think that there were a couple of moments there where it was looking pretty dicey as the Iranians, the IRGC, and the besieged were closing in on that location, and what the consequences could have been if they had captured him before he was rescued. Martha, thank you. We'll cut you loose. We'll let you get ready for your show. Coming up in about 25 minutes. We'll see you soon. Mark, let's turn to you now, because the extraordinary nature of this mission is really told in the idea that the president said this is the first time that he knows, probably many other people have ever heard, of something like this happening. 200 miles inside enemy territory with a force the size of the one that was launched to recover this weapons service officer. Here's what the president said he did when he was presented with the decision to call in the troops. Listen to what he said here.
And I ordered the U.S. Armed Forces to do whatever was necessary to bring our brave warriors back home. A risky decision, because we could have ended up with 100 dead as opposed to 1 or 2. It's a hard decision to make. But in the United States military, we leave no American behind. We don't do it.
It really is incredible that he pulled the trigger on something like this for one person, because if you recall back in the Vietnam War, there were some 500 to 600 U.S. pilots and other aviators who were held as POWs by the Vietnamese army, including John McCain. I'm sure that they would have loved to have gone in and rescued them, but it was just too dicey back then. But now the technology, the manpower, and the equipment that we have allows you to do something like this.
Yeah, I don't care if you like Donald Trump or don't like Donald Trump. I don't care if you support the war or don't support the war. If you're not brimming with pride at the skill and courage of the United States military today, I can't help you. What they accomplished to go in the first rescue, 7 hours of flying over Iranian airspace in broad daylight to rescue that flyer, and then doing the same thing at night to rescue the weapons officer, the pilot who had to fly his plane into safety of enemy territory, even though it was in the land of a friendly territory, even though it wasn't landable, and eject there. I mean, this is just absolutely stunning. It took enormous courage for the president to make the decision to do this. We could have had hundreds of dead Americans. We could have had it might have been not just aircraft that were left burning over there. And it's the same thing with Venezuela. We saw during the State of the Union what a risky operation that was when he gave the Medal of Honor to the helicopter pilot. And if you're China and you're watching how the United States military went straight into Venezuelan territory and took their leader, and then went straight twice into Iranian territory to rescue 2 American pilots, you have to be in awe of the United States military. And what this has done is strengthened deterrence in a way that's uncalculable.
Also, the details we received directly from the CIA director, John Ratcliffe, making it very clear how while they were conducting these rescue operations, they were actively having to deceive Iran. Here's Ratcliffe.
This was also a race against the clock, as it was critical that we locate the downed aviator as quickly as possible, while at the same time keeping our enemies misdirected. For that reason, in addition to the human and technical assets deployed by the president to find our airman, CIA executed a deception campaign to confuse the Iranians who were desperately hunting for our airmen.
He compared the search, Mark, to trying to look for a grain of sand in the desert. I mean, just think about how vast that mountainside was where they were looking for him. But these details obviously, surely will show that we do not leave any man behind.
Yeah, I love the statement that we care more about men than machines. President Trump was not at all concerned about the fact that we left some planes on the ground. Those can be rebuilt. Those can be replaced. We have a great defense industry that can produce more of those. You can't replace the people. You can't replace the pilot and the weapons officer. And we have just hundreds of people at the CIA who go in. They can't even tell their families what they work on. They can't even tell their children what they accomplished. Look what Daddy did. Everybody comes home from work and says, look what Daddy did at work today. They can't tell their kids. And they are out there every day thinking about our men and women in combat, making sure they're safe, making sure that they have the right information so they can carry out their missions safely. We have courageous airmen and special operators who have the backs of each other's backs. I mean, it's just, I'm in awe of the United States military. I'm in awe of the United States intelligence community. This is the greatest, most powerful country on the face of the earth, and it's because great men and women come to work every day to make it so.
I mean, we saw the operation to get Maduro in Venezuela, and now this. I mean,
yep.
That's a pretty great record for the U.S. military.
I hope you're watching, Xi Jinping.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.